use cases for Miro are for maps, user journeys, tool workflows, like this thumbnail that you see on screen we'll look at in Miro in a couple minutes, is just taking someone through a series of kind of graphical elements that where movement is helpful. And I'm going to use a term called useful movement or animation that is germane to the topic, because I think there's a lot of animations or movements or things you can add in any of these tools that move things but aren't necessarily useful. So I'm going to kind of caveat this by saying useful movement.
I always think Prezi, how it was like.
Yeah, sometimes you can get a little over Prezied and you got to take like anti-motion sickness pills before one of those because it can be really a lot. So this is useful, it's subtle, and I think really helpful when working through complex diagrams, technical drawings, things like CAD or business process notation workflows. There's just a lot of things in renewable energy in particular where it's technical, it's dense, and there's a lot on screen. And without any other tools, a subject matter expert will likely just put that on a PowerPoint slide and talk about it. The final one is just data sets, data tables. It's common that you'll represent something in a tabular format, and those are hard. Those turn into eye charts, and we can use this same technique to focus in on what matters most. So why Miro? I think just from a learning perspective, it reduces the cognitive load. You're not putting everything all at once and asking someone to focus on it. You can, as the presenter or educator, signal the importance of what we're talking about. And then you can use that movement or annotation to guide the view. And then another part that I'll contrast and hopefully is a takeaway is working with high resolution documents like a PDF, which is it stores the graphics in a vector format. And I don't know if you've ever zoomed in on a PDF diagram and it looks really good all the way zooming in. And then if you export that as a PNG or JPEG, it becomes blurry and pixelated. So something you can do in Miro is preserve that high resolution and zoom way in. That is the concept. And then I think we'll just dive into this demo. So let me escape out of Miro. And before I go into Miro, I want to spend 1 minute. Just, I think we all understand what a traditional format looks like, but just so you know, I'm going to set the stage. This is what maybe a traditional presentation might look like. Subject matter expert is going to talk about substation modification and shunt tripping, and then you're presented with 4 bullet points. They're following good practice for bullet points, not too many words per line, and then the visual. And now we're left to the presenter using their mouse to highlight certain areas as they talk through this and guide, and that can be helpful. They might use something like a laser pointer, and these, I don't want to dismiss the importance of that. I think this is actually a helpful technique. Just moving a mouse, cursor movement can draw attention. But you also might look at this diagram and think, I'm going to break it up, and so I'm going to zoom in on this. So I'm going to talk about this section specifically and this section. But this is the traditional way. So I want you to think of that as I contrast this with Miro. And this is an online tool. What I'm showing you is free. It's an infinite zoomable canvas, and I'm way zoomed out right now. And what I'm going to do is just show you a simple example on the left, and then a more complex example on the right. And then depending on time, we can stop for questions or we could build one up. The main thing in terms of a specific UI element in Miro that you need to understand and take away from this is something called frames. And it's this little corner in the bottom. It's called open frames. Now, you can think of a frame as a slide, but you're actually just zooming in on something and then zooming out. And so a really important best practice concept to kind of give you peace of mind when you're working with Miro is to name these frames exactly what you expect so that you know as a presenter, okay, I know I'm going to go introduction, and I just put in wide as like a wide shot. Don't need to say that. And then I'm going to go into the title, build lectures, Miro. And so I'm just going to click on that, and you're going to see Miro is going to take us to that part. And this is that wide shot. It shows everything that I want to talk about in this little section. And then I could go in and say, I'm actually going to zoom in on the title. And then we're going to go over to building your lectures using tools like PowerPoint and Google Slides, and then using Miro. So this visual is actually talking about this larger creator series and how if you go to each of these 3 series, you'll learn a new set of tools, workflow, and we're now on Miro, but we're moving on to this workflow, and then you could use OBS to record that, and then Descript to edit. So this was a simple one, and then I'm going to close on wide. you can see visually that each of these little boxes is a frame. And we're just moving from one to the next, and it started and it went here and here, and then it came out wide. Okay, so that is a simple overview of like just the core concept of Miro, frames, and zooming. And I think if you dropped off the call now, you could go off and have enough to tinker with Miro. But let's look at another example that is a little more complex. It's going to be an eye chart, so you're going to be like, what is this on screen? But I just want to show you a typical scenario for someone, a subject matter expert that has something complex and is going to walk through it. And hard to see all of those frames are mixed in with the diagram right now, and that's why that naming convention on the side is so important. I can see substation modification, that I've got a wide shot here, and I clicked on that and it's showing me the whole thing. And then in my mind, I said, I think it's important for us to talk about this legend and understand some of the elements that we're going to talk about in this. And then I want to, rather than show you the whole thing, I want to show you like a typical substation with control panels. And then I'm going to move over to a part that has this shunt trip that is this unique kind of like ability to remotely turn off a particular set of control panels versus manually going in with a qualified technician to turn it off. So these are all the technical parts of this drawing, but I'm moving through that. And then you can see that there's this kind of fiber network that I thought was important. So one interesting part of Miro is that in addition to these frames, you can add in extra annotations. What I haven't done yet is shown you the presenter view. So right now you see this slide view and other things. But if I went back to substation modification, so this is me, maybe I've rehearsed it. I've got OBS or whatever my screen recording software, it's going on in the background, it's capturing my screen. I'm now ready to present. So I'll just go to this view, and it's going to clear everything away, and it's going to place me on that frame, and it takes everything away. And now I can just use my arrow keys to go forward and walk through the legend. And then it's important to talk about the shunt trip and the control panels and the panel board. We can go to one without the shunts, one with it, and then highlighting this important idea of the remote trip, that somewhere else this connected resource can be turned off. So that kind of takes me through the presenter mode. I've captured that with my screen recording software, and I've been able to zoom in. And that's where, coming back to just like an educational theory, like if I left it at this wide shot or this wide view and I'm talking through it, I don't know where the learner is looking, but I can control and guide them through this complex diagram by moving through it. And that's the gist of the Miro kind of zoomable content. Now I'm still in presentation mode. I want to stop the full screen, and I have time to go through showing you how I would set one of these up from scratch, just draw the frames and move around. But before I do that, are there any questions that folks have around like what they saw or anything like that?
I'm interested, and this could be part of what you do next, to learn how you get the content in, because if it's really easy to get it in here, that would be one thing. And if it's not so easy, that would be another thing for me in terms of how
It's
much I
a
would use it.
perfect segue and a great question, because I'm going to go and show you how you can bring in all sorts of different things. In this example over here, I just copy and pasted icons I found on the internet. So that's like Google search, find the icon, paste in. That's one way to do it. But really, the workflow I would think of is I have a PowerPoint deck or I have a PDF, and I want to bring that whole thing in. And so what you would do is go here and say upload from my device. And at this stage, I had this PowerPoint, and this is a big one. It's 22 megabytes. It's 120 slides. I could import that whole thing and it'll just bring it in, and it does the exact same thing for a PDF. So in this demo, I'm actually going to import a PDF, but in your mind, remember that you could just do the exact same thing for a PowerPoint deck. I'm not going to do it with this one because it might take a little bit. But same thing. Here's this NREL 78-page or 80-page PDF. I can preview it and see this is what I want. So I actually have that PDF imported, and it's right here. And this is what it shows up as. This is that PDF document. It just gives me a thumbnail, and it gives me this little toolbar. And I should probably zoom in because it's tiny. In this, I can actually go through the PDF in this view, which is interesting. But what I want is to actually go and extract page. Let me see. I think the page I want is for my next visual, page 79. All right, so I'm going to go and say, give me page 79 and extract. And it's going to take a second to go find it, but this is the page. And now this is where I would do a little bit of prep to bring that in. And it's an infinite canvas. I'm just like taking this and maybe moving it over here so that I'm only focused on this now. And one thing you notice, I am going to scale this up. And this is just learning how Miro works best with zooming. But if you start big, you can zoom in, but there is a limit to like how much you can zoom in. So this is my next one I'm going to zoom in on. And I'm going to go to frames, and I think it's going to just add it to this next one. I'm purely just winging it here with a frame, but I'm just going to show you how I take this and move it, and maybe I decide that I just want to go through I see these callouts here, so I'm going to go wide, and then 1, 2, 3. So here's my wide shot, and that maybe it situates the learner so they know this is about draw out style. So following my own best practice, I'm going to call this draw out style. And I know this is my next area. This is just sanity check for me later when I need to know where to go. And then I'm going to resize this one. This is where the zoom happens. I'm going to drag that over this call out, and I'm going to call this patch. And then once I say plus, it's going to remember the size of that last one, which is a nice convenient thing. I'm going to move over here to this call out, and then I can call that one critical. And then my final one is, oh, I guess if I didn't have it highlighted, it just defaults to that bigger one. And as you're watching me do this, you might be thinking like, you're not really framing the right thing yet, which is true. There's a better way to present this information, but it demonstrates Miro. So here we have the wide view, the patch, moving over to critical, and then to this one. So that's an example of how I imported a large document, in this case a PDF, extracted just the page that I wanted, and then added those frames. And if I was thinking about this as a workflow, like how would I build this into a larger recording? I think I could probably use a traditional method of going through a deck where the slides were text, bullet points, visuals, but then in my mind, I have 5 pretty complex slides. I might use Miro for just those 5 and build it out, and then record those 5, and then I'd have to use some editing software to slot them in, if that makes sense. Alternatively, if you get into Miro and you really like it, you could present the entire thing, your entire deck, in Miro and record it, adding that movement. But what I demoed today was like specifically looking at those complex diagrams. Yeah. So that.
Yeah, Brick, I noticed you started us today in Canva presentation mode. Did you consider using Miro to start us off? And why did you choose Canva to start us off?
Yes, so Canva is another tool, probably one that we should put on the creator series because it's so great. But the honest question is that I could duplicate the template that I had built for the first one and use the styling and formatting so I had a consistent look for each of the creator series. But I did think about presenting directly in Miro because it could have just been inside Miro to do the whole thing.
And I'm curious, if you were not presenting live to other people and you were just going to record yourself with doing this, what would your current choice be for the recording software?
I think that in the theme of this tool series, I would use and set up OBS because I've got my little picture-in-picture, and I can zoom in or zoom out. I can disappear and come in with a little bit of movement, and I can control what people see in their screen recording with a little bit more detail than typical kind of off-the-shelf screen recorder. So I would use that, and I can control the resolution of the output file as well.
I was curious to see, this is awesome to see the way that this can take big concepts and walk you through almost like a storyboard. It feels like you'd have to have a sense of that before you do it. And I've used Miro to do interactive brainstorming. So it'd be interesting to be able to, depending on the size of the meeting and who it was, if you're not recording it, to be able to use some of those features. Do you think that they're compatible with the way that you've been presenting? Have you played with that, Brick?
Yeah, I think what I shared was the surface level, non-collaborative view. And you can invite people into your Miro board. You can see their mouse moving around, and there's all sorts of things up here that I didn't touch on. There's like voting and there's a talk track you can record inside Miro. A lot of these are held, it's like withhold that feature for the paid tier, which is fine. I think sometimes when you find it has that much utility, you're like, I will give you $7 a month because this is awesome. But I think Miro could do some of those, like inviting people in to drive a discussion or have a conversation just inside Miro.
Yeah.
But this one in particular, as I evaluated just this zooming panning feature, that is something that it was solving a need that I saw on some of the courses on our site when subject matter experts they just had something complex that they had to put on there. And I wanted to give them another way of thinking of presenting that could pull the focus on what matters and then zoom out in a way that wasn't too much movement. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
It's interesting to me when you were showing frames and the way that they're sequenced on the left-hand panel, it reminded me of OBS scenes where you are like setting up the flow, and it's equivalent to the slide outline in PowerPoint or Google Slides, where it is calming to see the sequence of events that will happen in one line and then step through it. There is like a sense of control you get that is helpful.
I also, it's interesting. I demoed like the full screen recording, and I think if I was creating an MP4 video that was part of a course, I probably would keep it full screen to only show that. I do like an informal presentations, and so like in this view, I think if I was presenting, like you guys can see where I'm going, and you can start to see like, oh, his mouse is over there. I can read the frame, and you have to be mindful of that. OBS in particular, you want to be rehearsed ahead of time and know what you're doing. So you practice a bit, and then you go in, so you know where to click around and what to show people. And these frames are like that. Angie, you had a question.
Yeah. What formats can you export out of this into?
So I think if you used this feature to like record, they call it a talk track, you would get an MP4 video directly out of Miro. So if you want to just do recording inside Miro, you could do it and you get an MP4 out. In terms of this presentation, I don't know. That's a really good question, because I hadn't thought about ways that you share this. And if you publish, I think they're guiding you toward their platform, their ecosystem. And then here is like an iframe so that you can embed the Miro experience on your site. But I think for some of this animation and movement, it would be challenging to export that as it'd be interesting like how they would approach like exporting that as a PDF or even a PowerPoint, because I don't know how they would do that.
The use case I'm imagining is not necessarily a course, but we have a new digital platform. We want to make a micro lesson on a particular feature. There's an info button that gets stuck. When you're showing screen shares, we had been talking about using Camtasia for those info videos, but this I think is actually much clearer. You can make that little clip more impactful. So that's the use case I'm thinking of, is these little video mini lessons embedded into a digital platform. Yeah.
It's interesting that you referenced Camtasia, because it does have it has a great built-in pan and zoom feature, and you can go into the editing track and you can manually you can control where that. I think the alternative, what we demoed today, was recording that live, in the sense of build out those frames, and then in the background, just use your preferred screen recording and just go through it. And then that way, once you've rehearsed it and you know where you're going, that recording, you don't need to edit it anymore inside Camtasia. You're not adding anything on the video track. You just have the animation baked in. So I thought that was a kind of a time saver once you've rehearsed it. Wanted to thank everyone for attending, and I'll be sharing out a link for folks that were on the call and for those that weren't able to make it. But thanks again for your great questions and your time today.